if the possibility is there that it's going to cause you to get emotional and burst into tears or whatever, don't talk about it in the essay.
For another Ask the Dean with former director of admissions, Dr. Scott Wright, master of all test prep.
Yes.
Not Dr. Rachel Grubbs. How are you all doing?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Doing well. How about you, Ryan?
I'm stoked. I think we should actually do a little bit. We didn't really talk about this before. We should do a little bit of screen sharing inside of the mapped software. Give people a little behind the scenes. I can pull that up.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea.
Fun, yeah.
Why don't we save that? Want to save that to the end? We'll do some Q&A now for people that are here hanging out with us.
Yeah, and we did have one question from someone who couldn't make it live.
Okay.
But so if you look in the comments, we can see one that it's from, well, we're keeping it anonymous, but it says thanks Rachel Grubbs in the starter, so you can tell
I see
which one it is.
Mm-hmm.
So we can start with
That's
that.
secondaries and
And I'll hide as usual, but I'll be around, guys. I'll see you later.
Bye. So I wanted to ask a question about secondaries, how I should tackle the adversity challenge one. Is it appropriate to share traumatic experience and how I learned from it? I hesitate from mentioning it since it may not be something that I, quote, could go back and do differently. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting question, but I think it's, to me, it would depend a little bit on what the event was or what the traumatic experience was. But I would say in general, that would be appropriate unless it's something that you wouldn't be comfortable discussing, but if it was the whether or not you can go back and do it differently is not really the issue. The issue is what the questioner said when he said, what I learned from the experience. That's the key. Is what did I get out of this? How did I learn about myself? How did I learn about others and interaction with others or whatever? As long as you are able to sort of talk about that and talk about that in a way that says, number one, I learned from this and here's what I learned, blah, blah, blah. And number two, this is why, having gone through that, it makes me a fill in the blank person, a better person, a more mature person, a more enlightened person, resilient, whatever. Then that's what you want to focus on. And so I think that's a great, opportunity to talk about something that was really rich in your life and had rich results for you. What do you think, Ryan?
No, I think what you hit on right at the beginning is typically where I go with students for this kind of thing. And not necessarily is it appropriate or not, but how comfortable are you going to be talking about whatever this is if it potentially comes up in an interview? So if this is a question.
Yeah, exactly.
And my assumption, right, when I read a traumatic experience, my assumption unfortunately goes to some sort of sexual assault, right? That's just a reading between the lines. I've had so many students ask, should I talk about this? Should I not? And I always go to, well, first of all, is it really answering the question? Yes. Okay. Right. Are you going to be comfortable talking about this if it comes up? And I think the far majority of interviewers are going to be aware of what you're potentially going to be talking about, and they'll probably stay away from the topic. But I've talked to students who the interviewer was completely clueless and still asked questions about it. Tell me about the time you were sexually assaulted. Like, really? Why would you want to talk about that? But if you wrote about it, it's fair game, and be prepared to talk about it.
No, you're exactly. And, you have to be prepared to talk about it in a way that's not going to make you too emotional. So if you... if you're gonna, if the possibility is there that it's going to cause you to get emotional and burst into tears or whatever, don't talk about it in the essay. So definitely.
I agree. Those are the kind of lines that I typically have for students well, two things, and let me get your take on this because I talk about this a lot too. When students, and again, unfortunately, I get a lot of questions from students asking, is this something I can talk about in a personal statement? Sexual assault being kind of one of those things that expose that student to medicine, to healthcare, to say, wow, like the way that I was treated and taken care of, and like I want to do that for others. The students ask, is that comfortable, or is that okay to talk about? And a lot of times I go to, yes, definitely, right? Obviously, if it's part of your story, it's part of your journey, it's why you're doing this, then you probably should talk about it. But potentially here are some ways to talk about it, because, and I always kind of draw this line, and we're two men here talking about this, and so maybe it's not completely inclusive. Maybe Rachel wants to jump in and talk about this too. But a lot of times I go to, you don't want to make the person reading your essay uncomfortable, right? Reading about someone's traumatic event, whether it is sexual assault, whether it is something else, you don't want to make them uncomfortable. And it's just like, right? I've even made comments like, why are you talking about vaginal discharge in your right? Aside from sexual assaults, like just talking about a patient experience of like, oh, this patient had vaginal, like, I don't care about someone's vaginal discharge. I don't care about someone's bowel movements. Like, I just like, I don't need those visuals in my head as someone reading this. So I don't know what your thought is for that side of it as well.
I definitely think that you don't want to be too graphic. You're exactly right. You don't want to create images in the reader's mind that would be traumatic for them or distasteful or whatever. So you really want to focus on not so much the event itself. I would be very sparingly in talking about whatever the event was. Just give enough details to kind of get the reader the understanding of kind of what the situation was, and then move on very quickly to, this is what I learned from this. This is why I'm a better person. This is why I'm, as you said, more resilient or more motivated to do this or that or whatever. So you're right. You don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about, it was an evening, it was raining outside, and whatever.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Rachel? As the woman here.
Well, so gender's a factor. Whether or not you've had trauma in your life is a factor when you talk about trauma. And I think all of us have had some form of trauma, but often similar traumas are more sympathetic to other similar traumas. It takes a lot of trauma work to start to realize that all trauma is trauma. Like, that's a much further along part of your journey. What I want to say is, if someone out here is listening or watching this and is thinking, did they just tell me, the victim, to be quiet? That's not the message here. And I know it's not, but I want to say it as someone who's not afraid to admit that she's been a victim. I don't think of myself as a victim anymore. I think of myself as a survivor. What I think the guys are trying to convey here, and I do agree with, is sometimes when we tell our stories, and it is so important that we do tell our stories, but if we tell our story to someone who's not ready for it, they get so pulled into feeling what you feel that they get pulled away from, in this case, what is the point at hand, which is, why medicine? Why do I want to be a doctor? I'm a big believer of turning your pain into power. So if you feel like you are far enough past your trauma that you can talk about turning pain into power, or pain into empathy, or pain into compassion, then by all means talk about it. But if when you are talking about it, you're still feeling a lot of that pain, then it might be that just by human beings being, I hope, mostly decent people, they're going to feel your pain too, which is good on a compassion level, but not so good on a thinking about why medicine level, because that's not the point. I hope that clarifies the message that we're trying to convey here. I would never want anyone to think we're saying don't tell your story. We're saying think about when and how you're telling your story. And right now, the topic at hand is we're saying personal statement. So why medicine? That's the question.
Thank you for that, Rachel. It's interesting, and going back to potentially even the comment, Scott, that you made about, think about how comfortable are you going to be talking about this in an interview without getting emotional? Now, obviously, emotions are human and they're natural and normal. But if we go back to a discussion we have all the time of what is the point of an interview, and a point of an interview, obviously, to get to know you and hear you talk and think about your logic and all that stuff. But it's also to picture you as someone who's going to be taking care of my loved ones. Right. And if you're sitting in front of me crying, emotional in what should be a professional encounter, I'm picturing you like giving bad prognosis or diagnosis to my loved one, and you're sitting there more emotional than my loved one. It's like, well, how?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I don't know if I like that picture.
Yeah. No, exactly right. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And the interview itself is an emotionally heightening kind of experience anyway.
Yep.
And so you're super nervous, and you're, it gives rise to allowing things to happen that you can't necessarily control potentially. And so I think that definitely, you want to be clear when you're putting anything, as you said, Ryan, into your application, because it does become fair game for an interview, particularly at schools where they're unstructured interviews, and an interviewer could go anywhere with it that he or she wanted to.
Yep.
And so I think you really have to be, kind of careful. I've had interviewees who, I remember one year, one of our faculty was interviewing a student and asked the simple question, "Tell me why you want to go to medical school." And in a heartbeat, the applicant burst into tears and cried the entire time.
Oh no! Oh no!
Yeah. So, and the interviewer felt terrible about it, and I gave her a lot of credit. The interviewer said, "I tell you what, why don't we go for a walk?" And so they walked around campus a little bit while they were talking and interviewing and stuff. And I think it kind of served to help the applicant to kind of get re-engaged and not be so heightened. And it was a little bit more casual and stuff in an office setting or whatever. So I thought the interviewer did a really nice job, but it just goes to show you that you're already super heightened in terms of emotional stance. And so, you don't want to necessarily do something that's going to even make that worse.
Right. Well, I think we've covered that topic pretty well. It does come up a lot, so I'm sure you guys will ask again at some point in the future, and we'll talk about it more when you do. Right now, we've got a question from someone who sounds like maybe some of their old contacts have had some trauma. Thank you for your time and insight. What should non-traditional applicants do for the contact information if it's been a few years and the advisor is dead, in jail, or off the grid?
Oh my gosh.
I hope they're okay.
Yeah, I hope so.
Wow.
So here we go.
Well, I guess if they're in jail, they still have contact information.
Yeah, contact info, county jail.
It might get censored or something.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Talk about that, right? How often are you actually ever reaching out to those contacts?
That would be pretty much never.
Pretty much never. Yeah. What would be something that you're just like, there's something way off here, I want to call and check?
Well, most of the time that occurs in a letter of recommendation or an evaluation letter where, the evaluator alludes to something, or, you just feel like there's some writing between the lines going on. And so I have had situations where we've contacted a letter writer and said, off the record, this is just a phone call. Can you, give me a little bit more about what you're referring to here or whatever. And it's interesting how often the letter writer will be more comfortable, when there's no, sort of paper trail to what they're saying. Yep. Both, whether it's good or bad, I think that often it's a situation where they're trying to save face for the student or maybe for them or whatever.
Yeah.
So that, I would say that's more normal than contacting someone that you shadowed or that you had a volunteer experience with or something like that.
That's
I've never
not to
really
give you free range to just make up stuff now, because nobody's going to check. There's always the possibility.
No.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think that there's, I think what is clear is if there's ever red flags, if there's red flags that come up when you're reading the stuff in the application, or if you just get a really odd sense of the timeline's not working out here, or there's something odd about, the applicant said something in this section of the application, but said something else in another section, which also goes to the issue of be consistent when you're filling out your application and your essays and all that. You don't want to forget what you said in one part and then say something somewhat different in another part. So, but all in all, I would say, just be clear on what you did. But if there's red flags or something, it is potential that an admissions officer, probably not a reader or a interviewer or whatever, it would most likely be an officer in the office that works directly with admissions, that would call up the person and say, hey, can I just clarify, something about this experience that you have with the student? So, but more to the point of the question, I would say if you don't have contact with the person any longer that you did this experience with, then all you can say is, I don't know where they are, or they disappeared, or God forbid they died 3 years ago, or whatever, or so I think we just have to be honest.
Typically what I tell students, because it comes up a lot, specifically for non-traditional students, is
absolutely.
Is usually it's a location where you're doing your volunteering, shadowing, etc. And it's not just one person whoever you had contact with, right? And so usually in those situations, potentially just like drawing back a little bit, instead of the physician, maybe it's the office. Instead of the office, it's the hospital, right? Just getting it some level of contact that somebody somewhere maybe can pull up a file that shows you were there.
Yeah. They may not be able to say much about the experience that you had as the doctor would, or the volunteer coordinator that you worked with or whatever. But I think that you're right. They can at least verify that you did it.
Yeah.
So for sure.
A question that came in that we won't show on the screen, because the name is on there, and it's one that we've talked about before, but formal postbac versus do-it-yourself postbac. Can you kind of briefly just touch on that again? And kind of, is one looked down upon, is one better than?
Now say that again. I'm sorry.
Formal postbac versus a do-it-yourself postbac.
Oh, right. Yeah, I think that, I think the thing about formal postbac programs is sometimes, not always, but sometimes they have connections with medical schools, where if you do well in the postbac program and you complete it or whatever, then you get an automatic interview at such and such med school, or something like that. There's these connections and stuff that can be beneficial. Linkages. I couldn't think of the right word. So I think that's a benefit to a structured formal program. Some students, however, can't do that. They either can't relocate, or their money is an issue, and they can't do that, knowing that they've got medical school debt coming in just a year or two. So I think that if you're on a do-it-yourself routine, then I would encourage you to do it at a school that has a good general advising program for pre-med students. They may not have a formalized postbac program, but you can take postbac classes there. And by virtue of doing that, you have access to the pre-med advisor or staff of advisors that you can work with in preparing your application and choosing classes, stuff like that. You don't want, and this is the downside to doing at a community college, and is that, number one, depending on your story, community college may not be the best option for you if you're doing a GPA repair work, for example. Then I would not recommend community college. Also, if you're I would say the other thing about community colleges is often they don't have specialized pre-med advisors. There's a few that do, but my experience has been that a lot of them don't. And the advisor turnover at community colleges is very extreme. So, you may be in a situation where you go through 2 or 3 advisors over the time that you're there, and that would not be optimal. So I think the benefits are very relative to your own personal situation and what you're looking at and what's gonna work for you in terms of location, in terms of costs, in terms of what your goals are and what your past experience has been. It's a very individual, I think, decision. But generally, if you can't do a formalized postbac program, don't lament that. You can create your own personalized program that will help, get you to where you want to go if you have some good advising.
Yeah,
like us.
Like Mapped. Yeah, like the team at Mapped. I think one of the things that I always try to remind students is that they are the ones that will make or break anything, no matter where they go.
Absolutely.
They have to put the work in, whether they go to a formal postbac or do-it-yourself postbac. It's them that's putting in the work, and the institution, the name on their postbac certificate, if they get one, and there's no utility in a certificate granting postbac or a non-certificate granting one, whatever. The name on that certificate and the name on those extra classes, that's not typically almost ever going to be what makes or breaks your ability to shine. Right.
That's right. It's the amount of work you put in on it that's going to be the key.
Yep. Rachel, cool. I don't know. Do you see any other questions, Rachel?
Yeah. Oh, there we go. We just got one. What about DIY at both community college and university?
Yeah. Hacking together what works for their schedule.
Yeah. I think, to me, I think it depends a little bit on your backstory. If you're trying to sort of paste together things because of scheduling or because of cost, at the end, I always talk about good, better, and best, or good, better, and optimal. Something could be optimal. Something could be, good, and something could be simply acceptable. Our community college course is going to be acceptable to meeting prerequisites and stuff like that. Absolutely. It's an accredited institution, et cetera. Is it going to be optimal? Well, maybe not. But, we all in our personal lives, we have to deal with, I may not be able to reach the optimal, thing because of cost or because of my work schedule or because of family obligations or whatever. So you have to just work with what you got and do the best you can, pulling things together. And if you have to do some of the work at community college, and you can do, you really do have to, I think, supplement community college work with some advanced sciences at the university level. To say, if I'm making a 4.0 at community college and I'm making a 4.0 at university in upper level stuff, then I think it gives the admissions committee the feeling that, okay, there's credibility here in terms of what they're doing. If you, however, make 4.0 at the community college and get to university and you're making B's, then they're going to say, well, the A's at community college may not have been really A's. It may have been that it was easier or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think it's about consistency. It's about whatever. So
yeah, I'm excited to be able to build that sort of algorithm into Mapped. Like, okay, you did 2 years at community college. Great. Your grades are great. Oh, now you're at your 4-year university and you've dropped down to a 3.0-ish average. Let me give you some feedback on why that is bad and why you need to be able to pick it up your senior year.
Yep.
Yeah. And depending on the institution that you're working with, if you if it's possible and I just saw that the commenter said it was due to cost, and that the strategy was definitely lower level stuff at community college and higher level stuff at university.
Great.
If you can go ahead and take one class early on at the university level, that's going to give you access to advising at the university level. Even if you're going back and taking community college work later or at the same time, if you at least take one class at the university, then you're locked into being able to get that advising help at the university level that could be really crucial to your success. And so that would be another option for you.
Yep.
So we've got a pretty detailed question about MCAT prep here. I thought I might stay on because I don't know if you guys want me to hack it, or if one of you.
MCAT expert.
I think I am. That's why I was like, oh, maybe I'm going to take that.
I mean, I do 2 MCAT podcasts, so.
That's true. Well, why don't we both chime in then? So I'll read it for folks who are listening later, not watching. How do I self-study for biochem for MCAT prep? The person says, it seems that I'll have finished biochem just a couple months before I take the MCAT, but being a non-traditional student, I'd have to start prepping for the MCAT much earlier. So first, let me say, this is normal. It happens all the time. The other thing is, it's such a bummer that it so often happens with biochem, because biochem is so important in the current iteration of the exam. Some people on this call, maybe some of the people who are live on camera, remember back when the MCAT was actually pretty distinct, and like your biology and your orgo was only in your biological sciences. But now they've made kind of a much a mix of the way the topics are asked, and particularly with biochem, you can see it in biological sciences, you can see it in chem phys, and you may even see it some in psych soc because of the neuro. So I don't think that it's the end of the world, but it is something that it's good that you're being mindful of now. Mostly what I advise people to do, and I've heard Phil at Blueprint say this many times as well, is don't try to do just one subject at a time, because if you just do chem and then you set it aside and then you do your orgo and you set it aside, that's not really preparing you very well for the way the exam mixes it all up. So I would say start studying for as much of the test as you can now. And if it does mean you have to skip some of the biochem, that's okay, but at least mix everything else together that you're ready for. And then just plan for more time doing biochem review at closer to the end of the prep. And keep in mind that until you do that, your full lengths may not really reflect your full ability, because those scores are going to be greatly impacted by having biochem in 3 of the 4 sections.
Yeah. Yep. It's funny when you were talking about don't just study chem and don't just study bio all separately. The thing that always comes to mind for me is sports analogies. And one of the things I always think about is golf, which I love golf, and I haven't played golf in years, unfortunately. Too busy with podcasting. Is the whole like practice as you play kind of analogy. And if you go to a driving range, anyone who knows golf and goes to a driving range, right, most people will pick one club and hit a bucket of balls with like one club, but that's not how you play golf. You hit a driver and then you hit an iron and then you hit this and hit right. And like it's good to just keep switching it up. And so same thing with MCAT prep, is keep switching it up and keep your brain on its toes and go from there. But as talking to Brian, talking to Phil, talking to Claire on the MCAT podcast, right? The key is usually like, you can self-study one subject. I'd probably max it out at that to make sure you're good with other stuff.
Right. Yeah. If you're missing more prereqs than one, then you might not really be ready for your MCAT prep.
Yep.
I agree with that. Well, cool. Our popcorn questions are popping kind of slowly. Before we go to a mapped, I know we were going to click around mapped. We did get one a little bit earlier that I just answered in the chat, but maybe we can circle back to. So we had talked about tough topics and personal statement, and then we sort of transitioned to like, no matter what the interview is about, it can be tough. And like we gave the example of someone just kind of bursting into tears. And immediately one of our friends watching said, I'm terrified something will come up and cry. Now, full disclosure, I already answered this in the chat, and my answer was half pre-med advisor, half yoga teacher. So what I said is that's why 1, you do mock interview practice, and 2, you learn to do extended breaths so you can hack your vagus nerve and activate your parasympathetic system, right? Let's do some rest and digest so we don't panic while we're testing. I'll let someone else expand on that.
Can you hide some like carotid massage while you're like doing an interview? Like, that's a really good question. Yeah.
Well, I think, my opinion is that one of the things that you have to do when you're prepping for an interview is recognize what is your propensity. What do you do physically or emotionally when you get nervous? And, and some of it's basic. Some people get cold. And so you need to have, or they get hot and they get sweaty. So the message there is to layer your clothing so that you can take your jacket off, or you can put your jacket on, or whatever. Maybe you get dry mouth, so have a bottle of water there with you, or have a breath mint.
Camel pack with a straw right there.
Yeah. Well, maybe not quite that, but but I think that you have to think about, the other thing that I see students do a lot is some students they clam up, they get really quiet and they don't want to talk, or the opposite, they're chatty box and the interviewer asks one question and 30 minutes later you're still answering it. So I think you have to
and they've checked out, they're on their phone now.
Yes, exactly. And I've had both of those happen.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to really think about what in a really gut-wrenchingly honest, sort of self-evaluative way, kind of think about what is my propensity. What do I do when I get nervous? And then work as much as possible to put structures there that you can deal with that will help you with that.
Yep.
So
1000%.
absolutely. And
that's, when I talk to students, the students who really, really struggle with mock interviews are the ones who think a mock interview is there, or just in general, practicing for an interview is there to be able to answer every question and to have an answer for every question and to think about every question that potentially could come up. And I always go back to exactly what you said is the goal of a mock interview, which every student should be doing mock interviews before their real interview, is to, number one, understand that you can answer every question that comes your way if you stop and think for a second. And just understand that a lot of the times it's the thought process of getting to the answer that is more valuable than just the final answer. So that's one thing I throw out. But then number two is literally, like you said, understand what your body goes through in that stress. Are you a sweater? Are you a dry mouther? Are you, and be able to be ready for those situations in the interview.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's nothing better than being gut-wrenchingly honest with yourself about what you do and what you're like and stuff like that, and then think about how's that going to be affected when I get into this high intensity, high anxiety situation. Yeah. So absolutely.
Yeah. And it's got to be more than just thinking about it, right? I'm like, oh, I think I'll be this way. I think I'll, like, no, you need to put yourself in that situation and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is a lot of times students are like, can we do an interview where you ask one question and then you give me feedback after every answer? And I'm like, no, that's not how it goes.
No.
I want you to freak out that you just gave a terrible answer and I'm busy asking you the next one. And you're like, wait a minute, I don't even hear what you're saying. Torture.
Exactly.
I love it. But that's life, right? It's just the way it is. And that's going back to sports, right? That's what made Tiger Woods one of the best golfers in the world back in the day, was he was able to clear his mind after bad shots and go back, well, that happened. Oh, well, nothing I can do about it, and go and hit a good shot next.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
All right. Thoughts about AP credits and dual credit courses for prereqs. Will medical schools accept them, and can they be substituted for higher level courses, or should they be retaken?
Yeah, this is a great, and I think this is a question that comes up more and more with students fast tracking their way through high school and doing a lot of AP stuff or dual credits or, whatever. And my advice on AP credit and even dual credit in high school is to, I worry about that a lot. And I think my advice is always to, if you know in high school that you're on your way, on the trajectory toward medical school, this is really what you're wanting to do, then I think you want to just have in your mind that I need to take these courses at the university level, and I need to work through them, because my worry is that if you're taking general chemistry in high school and you're doing it and then you're getting AP credit for Gen Chem 1 and 2 or Physics 1 and 2 or whatever, then you're going to, by the time you get to the MCAT especially, you're going to be so far away from that material, and you have nothing to build on, and it's going to be a real challenge for you. So, and to the broader, or one of the more specific questions in that was asked was, will medical schools take them? And that's a hit or miss. So some will and some won't in terms of AP credit. So I think that you have to be really careful about where you're applying and what their standards are. What you do know is if you take them at the university level, absolutely they're going to be acceptable. And if you are using the AP credit, it's going to be hit or miss. And so it may or may not work at some schools that will take you out of running for those schools. So, I think you need to really be careful about that. And I know this hurts moms and dads who are paying for AP stuff and paying for dual credit and stuff, but I think what moms and dads have to realize is what is the end result goal here?
Right.
Is the end result goal to save you $30 or $300 or whatever on tuition, or is the end result goal to get you into medical school? Right. Focus on the destination here, not on these little itsy bitsy things along the way that you're trying to save, when in the long run is going to be a small amount of money.
I wanted to chime in a little because I'm assuming this question is coming from someone who might actually still be in high school, maybe just recently graduated. Yeah. But there's still enormous value in doing AP credits and even dual credit courses just because of the rigor. So for those of you that I'm sure a lot of people here know something about college admissions because you students listening have at least gone through it. But the harder the rigor of your course load, the better your chances at the more elite schools. It's not just about the stats. It's about high school rigor. The other thing is, just speaking as someone who's been a mentor to really bright kids who kind of got knocked on their heinies when they got to college, is having calculus taught to you by your high school teacher and then having it again in college makes college calc so much better because it's so fast compared to high school. Yeah. So we're definitely not saying skip all those rigorous things. We're just saying be ready
no.
twice.
Yeah. I didn't take any AP in high school. No, thank you.
I took one or two, I think, and that was it.
Yeah. It's common now, especially for our listeners who are at suburban schools that are pretty large and pretty college minded, that you can have almost nothing but AP and honors your junior and senior year, where your GPA is pulled down by taking just a regular non-AP course, so there's so much pressure on the AP now. But it's sort of a separate question when you're talking about, and then how will it help me again for med school, as Dr. Wright said.
Yeah. This leads to another question that I get asked pretty frequently that I think might be interesting to cover here. And that is the question of students who are considering doing an honors program at their college or university. And I get to ask the question, should I do the honors program? Will it look good in my application? Will it help me in the admissions process? Will that affect how medical schools look at the courses that I'm taking, if there are honors courses or whatever? And my advice on that is you're in the wrong mindset to start with. You're in the I'm going to do everything because it looks good mindset. And that is the totally not right mindset to be in. The mindset to be in is, do I want to do this for the value of the experience that it's going to give me?
Yep.
And honors programs are great. They add a lot of richness to your college experience. And if you want to do it and you have the ability to do it, I would say, fine, that's great, but don't do it because it's going to look good in your application.
Yeah.
Do it because you're going to grow out of it, and you're going to be experiencing courses and the depth of things that maybe you wouldn't get in the traditional classroom. So, don't get in that mindset of, well, I'm going to do this because it looks good or whatever. That's just the total wrong path, I think.
It's such a common mindset for students to be in, and it's the mindset I fight day in and day out, just all the time. And I'm sure I've told you this story before, Scott, but I love telling it because it just really highlights the mindset. I was at a conference, and a student came up to me after I gave a talk, and I was back at my table handing out books and stuff. And the student came up to me and said, "Dr. Gray, I have two things that I could do this summer, right? I was accepted for these two different programs. I have this program that involves X, Y, and Z, and I have this program that's A, B, and C. Which one should I do?" And they were in the mindset of which one will look better when it comes to applying to medical school. And I said, which one do you want to do? And they're like, no. Like, which one should I do? No. Which one do you want to do? And the student literally, Scott, the student literally got mad at me, turned around and stormed off because I wouldn't answer the question the way that he wanted me to answer it. It's something I fight daily, but it's so important because the more that you can stick to what you want to do and your passions and the things that you're doing, whether it's an honors program that you brought up because the classes are smaller and you feel like you're going to be more engaged and you having better access to the teacher will make you more successful, go do it because you're going to have fun. Not because it's going to look better on an application, which a lot of times it just really doesn't, right? It's just one little small flag.
You're right.
Like, oh, look, an honors program. Okay. It's a constant battle.
Ooh, there's a really good question.
I love the bottom one there.
That's exactly what I was looking at.
Any advice on how to navigate talking to your parents about medical school and explaining your path to medical school? So I'm going to start just briefly on this one. Having gone through this process, absolutely no one, unless they are a physician or sometimes health related, right? They're a dentist, they're a PA, whatever, where they know a little bit of the process. Absolutely no one knows what the heck you're going through when you go through medical school, when you're a pre-med, right? Typically you're a junior in undergrad and your family's like, "Are you a doctor yet?" I'm like, no, I'm not a doctor. Right? You take the MCAT. "Are you a doctor yet?" No. First year of medical school. "You're a doctor now, right?" I'm like, no. And it's just something you just have to like. I want to like print out these like satirical like, here's my journey, here's where I'm at kind of cards that they can just so you don't have to explain it every time at Thanksgiving dinner. Yeah.
Well, I think that this is the kind of question that leads to the bigger discussion about parents in general. And I think that I think a lot of the answer to this question is that it depends on what your relationship is with your parents. And it also depends on what your parents' background is. If your parents are college educated and so they know a little bit about higher ed and their own experience, and so they get it and they sort of know, something about the pathway going into, upper degrees and stuff like that, then that's going to mean one thing. If you're the first generation in your family to go to college, and your parents really have no clue about anything, that's going to be a whole different level of conversation. Yeah. Just as you said, Ryan, it's going to be very basic. You're going to really be giving them a primer on higher ed in general, and how all this works. And I think secondarily to that is parents who are very, how would I say, intimately involved in all of your process. Yes, there you go. I even heard it heard them described as attack helicopter parents.
Attack helicopter.
So we're talking about an Apache helicopter or whatever here. And so I think that what a lot of this is about your relationship with your parents and what that's like. And do you have the ability to be honest and really open with them? The biggest tragedy is when I've gotten to dealing with students who did not want to go to medical school, and their parents were forcing them to do it.
Yep.
And this is just a tragedy to me, because what it's going to do is it's either going to mean some really devastatingly, potentially traumatic experiences for the student,
yep.
or what is even worse is that the student's going to go through medical school and be miserable in their career.
Yep.
And it's all because the mom and dad forced them on that pathway. And so I think ultimately, it depends a little bit on your own experience with your parents and your relationship with them and what that's like. And boy, it's not easy. I completely, completely understand that students sometimes deal with very difficult situations with mom and dad. So.
Yeah, I don't think I've told you this before. I don't think Rachel knows this either, but one of the books that I want to write eventually is the Pre-Med Playbook Guide to Being a Pre-Med Parent.
I think that would be awesome.
Yeah.
I think
parents need to understand.
Yeah, there would be lots of parents around the country that would really love to have a book like that, because they earnestly, I think most of them earnestly want to understand. They want to know what's going on.
They have the best intentions.
Yes, they want to be supportive. Yeah. Not all, but most.
Not all, but most. Yes. There are way too many parents who try to live vicariously through their children who put their own worth on what their kids are doing and all that fun stuff. But that's we can't fix that. But we can educate and hopefully help students through their parents.
Yeah,
so that's
absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, that's awesome. I'm sure there are probably some more questions, but I want to dive into the actual software real quick now that we have access to it. So probably the best way, what shows up here? Oh yeah, all three of us are there. So this is my window here. And the dashboard right now is empty, right? We're still building the dashboard. There's nothing too much there. I have my course list here. I added one course, and you can kind of see where we're playing with how do we provide a lot of information on just a little bit of a screen here. And so we have, this is University of Florida's Chem 101 is their 2045, and it counts as a science course for the MD application, DO application, Texas application.
Is that an accredited school or?
Hey.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It is the only
off topic.
The only accredited school. So you can see little arrows here. I can sort. Obviously, there's only the one here, but we can add another one. So let's add a new course here. Do chemistry. I don't know where this course name goes. We're still learning. We'll do chemistry 2. Program type is still undergrad. We'll do chem. And there's a lot of stuff here that we're going to play with. And so if you have any feedback while you're watching this, let us know. Subject, chemistry. I got an A, of course, because I am awesome. And we'll say it was 3 credits. So right now, it's not checking off any of these boxes. We want that to be a feature to where we know that Chem 2046 is these science courses for the MDDO and Texas application. Obviously, if you're repeating a course, we can check that off as well. So then you can see it gets added there. You get a little pop-up notification there. And then we can sort and see fun stuff. And then on the dashboard, eventually we'll have GPA graphs and other information that we can see. So lots of fun stuff there. Again, you can kind of see, you can filter, so you can see only the science courses, you can only see chemistry courses, whatever, right? Obviously, if I picked biology, none will show up because I don't have biology. Contact information. So I added Bob Dole. I don't know why Bob Dole popped into my head, but I added Bob Dole to my list, and so I marked Bob Dole as a letter of recommendation person that you can see here. You can add new contact information for people, mark them as letters of recommendations, all that fun stuff. Activities here. So again, I have shadowing for Bob Dole. And if I want to add another shadowing, I can add a date here, a no end date because it was just a one-time thing here. And it was 3 hours and had a blast. And so the hours are automatically totaled so that you can keep track of this. You can keep like a diary. I talk about this all the time. Have a diary of everything that you're doing so that when it comes to applying, you know what you're up to. A general description of the entire shadowing encounter, etc.
Yeah.
MCAT, we're still working on. You can just add scores and stuff like that. We're going to add some practice full lengths. Med schools. So we have a med school list here. I can filter by state to go, okay, I live in Colorado. I have 2 schools here. Let's look Colorado and Kansas. I want to add University of Kansas to my list. So I click that little flag there. And so when I go to my med school list, I have some schools that I'm thinking about, which is fun. And then part of this will want to have like estimated costs based on how big your school list is. And you can click in and see some information, and we're going to have all the secondary essays in here as well. I'm so excited. So excited. Mm-hmm. That's a basic rundown. We'll have some resources and information and other stuff in here as well. So anything else I should show off real quick?
I mean, I think that's the stuff we can show right now. So once we have our dashboard built in, guys, then you're going to start to get to really see that it's not just information tracking like Dr. Gray's showing today, but like reporting and analytics. And Dr. Wright's working on some algorithmic stuff, not in terms of the coding, but in terms of if he were your personal advisor and he saw these things that you entered, what would he say? Yep. So we're going to, it's not just about the stats, but there are patterns. So Dr. Wright is thinking about, okay, when I see certain patterns, what are the comments that I'll want to make? So that we're really trying to give you, as you're entering this stuff throughout your pre-med process, right? Not just right before you apply, but in the years leading up to it, you can get some feedback.
Yep.
But here's a question.
Residential colleges, programs that are more geared toward one specific type of major. Will the software take that into account when adding some of the courses? If you need me to explain it better, I can definitely send a message about it. Send a message. I'm assuming it's very similar. A lot of colleges are moving to like this Harry Potter style of colleges within the school. A lot of medical schools are doing that now too.
Yep.
I mean, at the end of the day, the question is, how does it affect your application? How does it affect the potential advice to give? In my mind, if it's not a huge impact on the advice that we would give you, and the advice potentially for the impact to medical school, I don't know how high up on the list it would be, but it'd be interesting to hear the students' thoughts on what they think.
Yeah, I would definitely like to see more. I mean, from a class perspective, we're pulling registrar data and we're pulling every class they offer. So like this is a really simple example and might not be as detailed as what the question asker is getting at, but at lots of schools you can take chem for someone who just has to take chem and chem for someone who's going into some kind of science-based career, right? And that might be broken out by collegiates, right? It might be like, the science class, the chem class for the language majors and the chem class for pre-meds, but that already exists in lots and lots of places. And that's part of why we're pulling the entire registrar, because at U Florida, for example, it's 2045. That's the chem that is, it's not the only chem one. It's the chem one that is the right choice for pre-meds.
Yeah. And so just to show that, and this is just an example here. So this is University of Florida's actual course catalog. And so we are going and gathering all of the course catalog information for all of the schools. We have, I think, 5 or 6 people now doing this full time. So we should be able, no matter if it's a separate college within the college or whatever it is, all of that information should be in the course catalogs. And so just to show like Chem 2045, you can see all those classes here. And again, I think one of the examples that I gave on National Pre-Med Day is knowing, hey, there's a 2045 lab. Do you want to add that too? Right, having that sort of logic would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very exciting.
It is. Somebody asks, will there be a way to link maps with Interfolio to track letters of rec requirements by school? So I feel like that might be a two-part question. Linking map with Interfolio, not in a month and a half or 2 months or 3 months when this goes live. That we won't be there yet. Maybe one day.
Well, I wouldn't say we would. I wouldn't say anything. I think the more likely scenario is we replace Interfolio.
Oh yeah.
I love that.
Random aside.
But tracking letters of rec requirements by school, yeah, that's something we're definitely going to help you do.
Yep.
Yeah.
That will be part of MAP as well. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So that's the kind of school specific stuff, right? When you add a school to your school list, Mapped will be able to at some point go, hey, you added University of Florida Medical School to your list. They require these 3 letters of recommendations and these 8 prereqs. You only have 7 of the prereqs and 2 of the 3 letters. Here's some information. So
yep.
That is the goal.
Yep, it is. Cool.
All right.
Cool.
Well,
wow.
friends, we've come to the end of another episode.
Now it's time to say goodbye.
I'm so glad we've had this time together. That's old school.
We are going to work on syncing up our songs. Are we Mr. Rogers? We'll work on that offline, guys. But for now, thanks as always for watching / listening. And we will have another Ask the Dean. For those of you that are live, it'll be right here in the MAP group at 6 p.m. next Monday.
Next Monday.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks all.